Okay, so the next slide is actually we're going to try to use this technique in the future modules too, so that we can start, keeping track and
Yeah, this is an
indexing various.
excellent slide, Tom. I have to say, I love this slide. Go ahead,
Well,
please.
I would think so, since you were the one to ask me to do it. Uh, but it basically, there's four groups here. One is the money laundering techniques, that were used here. And as you can see, there's quite a few. When we get into the other modules or whatever, you're going to see, some of these again, but you're also going to see quite a few other techniques that were used later on, but weren't used here. The second one is from the bank's perspective. Where did some of the banks that were involved have an opportunity to maybe stop the embezzlements or theft or cover up or money laundering? And what were those missed opportunities? At the bottom, we have the applicable laws and regulations. And then we also are starting to index the people involved. In virtually all of these, as far as the laws and regulations, we're going to have embezzlement, self-dealing, bribery, money laundering, and some technical things like the travel rule and industry protocols. The Malaysian FX controls were very important in the PetroSaudi scheme and a couple of the other ones. With respect to the people and entities, you're going to see very dramatic changes in some of them. You'll always see Jolo and his allies. You'll always see the prime minister, but you won't see the PetroSaudi people after this phase. You'll see different banks. You'll see different co-conspirators. And then on the top two portions of this slide, very much the concept of bearer shares, play a role here. State-owned enterprises, I can't emphasize enough, how inconsistent bearer shares in a state-owned enterprise would be. I mean, they're totally incompatible. The whole government guarantee of debts gets into the discussion we have on, where the state is actually guaranteeing debt, the full faith and credit of the Malaysian people to the benefit of individuals. And you see that on the bonds or the bank loans or whatever. And there's a whole series of bank loans that are guaranteed in this, that are every bit as much an embezzlement as, just a simple theft. But they're not on the balance sheet. You don't see it in the same way. And the U.S. has the same problem, where the U.S. government may be guaranteeing a lot of debts, or, our deposit insurance or other types of guarantee. We have the loans programs that are guaranteed by the government, and people can abuse those guarantees in a way, for self-dealing. We also have stock sales, fraudulent valuations, various networks. Very interesting in this is how law firms and real estate are used for layering, and then non-transparent and formatting of wires, as well as really bad governance, both for the state-owned enterprises as well as the banks. And then on the missed opportunities, we'll go through that in quite a bit of detail in the next slides. So I'll just use this as an indexing for now.
I'm sure that you will go through the missed opportunities in details, but I can't help but mention that. So when the banks miss the opportunities to detect this, it's like anything in their AML program, particularly for this case, what would help them not to miss?
So that's a really interesting question, and it's something that, as I was preparing just for this presentation, even after I developed the deck, I've been thinking about. And you have the relatively obvious things from a KYC perspective, the use of a single bearer share that is owned by Jolo, and actually RBS Coots, actually helped him set up the bearer share company and was allowing their address to be used for storage of corporate records and that sort of thing. So that's your traditional KYC. You also have your traditional, watching the funds, monitoring the funds, make sure that they're being used the way they should be. You have very unusual bank BSI, which exits just 2 days before the transaction is going to occur. And you have JP Morgan that I haven't seen anything on this, why JP Morgan out of Switzerland would come in just days before the state-owned entity is supposed to get, all this money and basically substitute themselves. I don't know how they could have done due diligence. There's just been nothing out there. So, I mean, truly, it's an I don't know what happened. And you have governance. But one of the more interesting things, and I'll talk about this in the detailed slides, is you have 70 employees from RBS Coutts in Singapore who, during the middle of all of this, I mean, we're talking days, during the middle of all of this, actually leave RBS Coutts and move to BSI in Singapore. And remember, BSI in Switzerland is the one who is saying they don't want to have anything to do with the transactions. Well, RBS Coutts is now faced with having the remaining customer, which is Goodstar, that had just gotten all of the money, the 700 million, and would later get quite a bit more money. But all the relationship people that brought it in, had, exited en masse to go to a competing bank. Very interesting, but I haven't seen a lot of discussion on it. Within a few weeks, the compliance group in Switzerland met with Joe Lowe and a senior 1MDB officer in Switzerland. So they had to fly halfway around the world for this meeting to explain what was going on after the money had already been dispersed. And you have, them checking, passports to make sure they are who they say they are. But you don't really see much happening after that. One of the things that I think, as far as missed opportunities, is once you get to the point where, you have essentially a disloyal office in Singapore that brought all of these customers in, had all of this money, and then they go to a competing bank, and you're still stuck with the accounts, and you're so concerned that you have people fly in person halfway around the world to talk with you. Like, why didn't they really watch the use of funds, very, very carefully, so that they could say, well, this is supposed to be, used for energy development or other, state purposes. And instead, what we have is very unexplainable uses of money that we'll go through in great detail later. I don't know if that responds to
yeah,
your question,
absolutely.
Shanaz, but
Such a great point. Absolutely, because I think that I can completely relate with this huge big point that was missed. I think that you could definitely find this out. It is not something that would hide under the rugs. So yeah, it's exactly. I think this would be one of the biggest point that could lead many good points if this was found right on the right time.
So just going back to our shared services, when we were both working at the same bank, we had a group. It was in first line of defense, called the remediation committee, that would, once you identified a customer that had to be watched from a governance perspective very, very closely and on an ongoing basis, you would put it into a separate group that would be, watched by very senior people and would have governance on that. And you would have regular assessments. And, it took us years and years to come up with that approach, because it's not, traditionally required. But what we found was once you identify a customer that is really concerning, you may not have enough information to do a complete exit or something like that, but you have
Correct.
enough that you want to be able to watch what they're doing. But you don't want that watching to occur at a clerical level. You
Mhm.
want to have people who truly have business acumen and various stakeholders that are doing it. Like for me, the really interesting thing would have been, what if RBS Coutts in Switzerland, after this whole thing blew up,
Mm.
put this account in such a scrutiny, and we're looking at, the use of funds on a regular basis, saying, is the use of funds consistent with, the funds that we got that clearly they were uncomfortable with when they got it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember you mentioning this, I think, during the discussion on module 2. Uh, you were talking about AML checklists. I completely remember that, sometimes it doesn't help. And while, bankers could be very happy, ticking all the points, but, at the same time, the customers may be aware of the checklist and they know what to answer, what would please the banks. So this was also another point that you mentioned, and I kind of really liked it a lot. It's very, very important.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. I mean, I will use this phrase consistently throughout all these modules. You have to have a sense of purpose. You can't be relying on pageantry or checklist. It's hard enough to be watching all of this money go and trying to figure out, like, what should I process and what shouldn't I process, if you have a sense of purpose. If you don't have a sense of purpose and you're just going through a checklist, you have almost zero chance of succeeding. And as we'll see in all of these modules, Jolo understands the checklist better than anybody. So actually, he's going to do a decent job, especially as he goes later into these and becomes more sophisticated. He's going to do a good job of meeting the checklist. The problem is you have someone with true business acumen that is saying, is the story holding together consistently and does it make sense from a business perspective? Then everything falls apart.
Absolutely.